I'm Andrea, a passionate DEI advocate and consultant on a mission. Join me in each episode as we celebrate diversity, ignite conversations, and craft workplaces and educational institutions where everyone thrives. This podcast is my commitment to making a meaningful impact on the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So are you ready? Let's get diversifused. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Get Diversifused podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Horton-Mericli, founder of Diversifuse Consulting and a passionate DEI advocate and ally. In today's episode, we will discuss advocating for hidden disabilities, a conversation on learning disabilities and inclusion with our guest speaker, Michelle Steiner. Michelle lives with an invisible disability. She has published articles on the Mighty, Nonverbal Learning Project, Dyscalculia blog, The Reluctant Spoonie, Calopina Collective, Imagine the World as One magazine, and Word Gathering. She also has had her photographs featured in Word Gathering and Independent and Work Ready. That's pretty cool. I really need to see these pictures. She works as a paraeducator in a school with students with disabilities and lives in Pennsylvania with her husband and 2 cats. You can find her at her blog, Michelle's Mission, and I will be giving you the link to that blog at the end of our podcast today in one of the ending slides, as well as in the summary of our podcast. So welcome, Michelle, to the Get Diversifused podcast. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You are very, very welcome. So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and how you came to become a paraeducator and decide to publish articles about hidden disabilities?
I live in Pennsylvania with my husband, Ron, our 2 cats, Jack and Sparrow. I am also a paraeducator. Yes, when we adopted them, the owner's name, they were huge Disney fans. So we thought, okay, we got to keep that. And I work as a paraeducator in a school with students who have disabilities and some who don't. And I also am a writer and a photographer, and I love to take pictures and I love to write about learning disabilities. And my journey with writing and photography began when I was pretty young. I was in a school and I was diagnosed with having a learning disability in kindergarten. And for the longest time, I thought that I wasn't good at anything. And life was always going to be a real struggle for me because I struggled socially and academically, especially with math. That was always the big area. And I thought, I'm just not good at nothing. And I can remember I always loved books. My dad would read stories to me whenever I was very young. And I loved to write. And I wrote a story about a dinosaur. And I can remember my dad found that story about a dinosaur and said, wow, this is really good. And from that point on, it just encouraged me to write more. And writing and reading became my world for me, especially when I was being bullied. And I had a lot of people that just, I wasn't included with a lot of my peers. And I really loved doing that. And I can remember I also, as I went throughout school, life got a lot easier for me academically, but socially it got a lot harder for me. I can remember the peer groups became more defined and I just didn't feel like I fit in anywhere. And one of the things that I did is I joined a teen writing group that was at a school district just a town away. And I was able to be able to meet other people that didn't know me and I could shed that reputation. And that really helped me with a lot of writing and having that acceptance. And then once I stopped meeting with that group, I found an adult writing group, and 30 some years later, we still meet every Saturday to talk about our writing. And they got to see me grow as a writer and a person. And they told me, you really should write about having a learning disability. And I thought, oh no, that's too personal. I think I wrote some really bad poetry and some other really cringy things that I would not want to read today. But as I went through school, I knew that I wanted to work with kids, but I had a lot of people who didn't think that I could do that. And I eventually, what ended up happening was I went to college. I got my bachelor's degree despite being told I couldn't do it. And it was whenever I was done with school, I got married and we bought a house, and they found out I had limited hand dexterity and I could not open the door at our home. And I thought, I'm going to write an article about this. The Mighty had a call for what's a seemingly easy task for other people, but it's hard for you. So I thought, I'm going to write about this. And I had that courage to write about it.
That's awesome.
And when I finally got that courage to write about it, that just was a whole new world opened up for me. I got a really great response, and that encouraged me to write more articles. I had a lot of people say, well, that's my story, or I struggle with that, or I thought I was the only one. And I wrote more articles and got them published. And I also started my own blog called Michelle's Mission. And I also started with photography as well. I had someone who really encouraged me when I was younger and said I had perspective, and I kind of put that on the shelf. And I can't drive because of my disability. So what I get the chance to do is to take pictures of flowers and of a lot of different things when I'm on my walks. And people will say, you bring out details in flowers that I miss. And I get that chance if I'm on a walk, I get to take pictures of flowers. And that just really helps me and makes me feel empowered and thinks, okay, if I was driving, those are some of the things that I would miss.
Yeah, definitely. As you were explaining everything, and thank you so much for your story. So personal stories are so powerful and impactful. So I'm so happy to hear that your friends and in your writing group really encouraged you to write about your disability, because there are so many, well, especially hidden disabilities. There are so many people that do have them, one or more, but are afraid to admit it because of shaming or being treated differently. All those stereotypical ways of others, how they treat you once they learn, which I wouldn't say a lot of times, but often I would say is not the case, because our fear is what is keeping us from truly being our authentic selves and exposing our vulnerabilities to others. And so I'm so happy to hear that they encouraged you to do that. And when it comes to photography, I was going to ask you what kind of pictures you take. And so you walking, you get to see the beauty of nature up close. Not that others don't, but it's, as you said, people in vehicles and on public transportation, they're running to and from places. They often walk and move with blinders on, and I'm guilty of this a lot of times too. Sometimes I don't even see my best friend walking right next to me until she hits me. It's like, hey, wake up. I'm like, oh, how long you been there? 2 blocks. I'm like, oh. So as I've gotten older, I've also stopped to when I'm walking out and about, look at nature and the beauty of it, and it's things like that people don't often get to appreciate. So you help them, you bring that beauty to them so they can appreciate that. And something that you had said way in the beginning, when you said that you, as a teenager, I believe it said you went to another school district to join a writing group. So you separated yourself. You stepped out of your familiarities.
Yep.
And what you were grew up around, and you stepped out of your comfort zone. And oftentimes that's what's needed to, that fear, taking that step, and not just individuals with disabilities, but for all of us to really get a feel of what we can do and how talented we actually are. Because our own fears and self-doubt get in the way and prevent us from often being our best selves.
Exactly. And sometimes that can be, because I understood, though, with stepping out of my comfort zone, that the people that I went to school with, it didn't matter if I joined a club at school or something. I knew that I had a lot of those issues, and it was going to be hard. And I did have some clubs that I did belong to, but I knew that I was going to have to step outside of the school to get some things with that. And that was scary, but it was so worth it to be able to do that. And going into a writing group with adults, whenever you're just maybe a few years shy of becoming one, was a little bit intimidating as well, but I mean, I was really lucky that I got involved with the right people, and to do that and to have that encouragement, because that just saved me. Getting involved with the right people saved me from doing a lot of stuff my peers were doing and get not, I didn't get into a lot of that trouble because I already had older friends who were doing things, or on the right path. So that was really an encouragement for me with being able to do that. And it helped me when I did go to school to know, oh, when someone's picking on me, that I could say, well, no, that's not how I want to be treated, because I know what it is like to be accepted. So I didn't fall for a lot of things that they would do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Because a lot of students, young youth, way back when and in today's world, don't realize that they can change their environment.
Yep. Exactly.
But they have to take the first step, have the courage to take the first step, which can be very scary. But it was so good that you had a supporting family as well.
Yes, definitely.
And so when others don't, it makes it a little bit more scary, or scarier.
Right.
But we are in control of ourselves, and that's something that even adults don't always understand, that we have the power to push ourselves to our limits,
right,
in a positive way and in a negative way.
Exactly. You can push yourself. And I can see some of the lessons that I did learn from those years. I can be somebody that is more independent. I can work with other people and I love it, but I can also be content to be there by myself, or sometimes it's not to always follow what everybody is doing blindly. And I just think a lot of that just came from all those years. If I wanted, especially when I was single and I was moving, I was out on my own too. If I wanted to go and do something, I had to do it. I couldn't wait to sometimes have somebody with me. And I was also an only child for 13 years until my brother came along. So that also shows that you have that independence. Yeah. And some of that really served me well in life.
Yeah, I bet it has. And then that's so wonderful that also that you were diagnosed at such a young age.
Yes.
Because you being a paraeducator, me being a former educator, we know how tough it is to get the school districts to test children.
Yes.
Parents really have to fight
they
for
do.
it. And sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it never happens. And
exactly.
It's a shame, because the lower income the family is, or the more if it's a single parent home, or if the parent or both parents or a guardian or guardians are working more than one job, they don't always have the time. And not that they don't want to do it, but unfortunately the ones that get affected are the children. And then they get those labels, and so you, as I said, you being a paraeducator, me being a former special education educator, we know that those labels really, really, really affect the children, and they grow up, and sometimes they just get passed on.
Right.
Sometimes due to age, sometimes due to other factors. But the thing that really got to me when I was a teacher was the way the other teachers would speak about the children, and try to influence the way you thought about them. Even before you met them, they saw them on your roster, and it's just like, oh, heck no.
Right.
So it's like if you are an educator, someone who works with individuals who are from some kind of marginalized population, like those learning disabilities, you have to really be able to make sure that everybody has a blank slate coming in, and that you are not letting other people's opinions affect your opinion and your actions, because and body language is a type of action. And because kids are absorbing everything, they can see, they know how you feel about them, they know who really cares and who doesn't.
Yeah, very true. And as you said, I was really lucky to be diagnosed early, especially during that time period where they really didn't know a whole lot about learning disabilities, and they just had legislation passed. And I think some of that had to be because I, being an only child too, I grew up around adults. So everybody knew I was frustrated. And I didn't get to go have a peer do things for me. They could see that I really was upset, and I was going to express how I felt maybe easier than maybe another kid would. And my teacher's the one that picked up on that. I was my parents' first child, so they didn't have a whole lot of what development is. I mean, obviously they couldn't see that I had that. And sure enough, my parents were great. They never gave up on me. They consented to having me tested. And it was a little difficult for them when they found out I did have a learning disability, because I think it's just they didn't have an understanding too. And some of the things that they saw that happened with students who had disabilities when they went to school wasn't always in the most positive sense. But they went forward, and I can remember them. My dad said that they told me, your daughter will never understand math. And for my dad, being really good at math, he was like, well, what do you mean? 1 + 1's always going to be 2. Why is she not going to be able to understand that? And he did see throughout the years that certainly I'm not going to be a mathematician. They determined that at 5 or 6. It just was not what I was meant to be able to do. But one thing my mom and dad never did was they never gave up on me. They went to the individual education plan meetings. I also had the privilege of talking with one of my first special ed teachers a couple years ago, and I got a chance to thank her.
Nice.
And she said, well, your mom and I worked together. If she had a concern, she would call me. And if I had a concern, I would call her. And the two of them really worked on my behalf. And that was my mom's favorite teacher. She really liked my first one. Got a really good experience with her. And my mom and dad would advocate for me too. I can remember before they would go to IEP meetings, this is before students started to attend them, they would say, hey, we have a meeting. Is there anything that you want us to discuss? Because they wanted to know what my concerns were. And they would talk about it at the meeting. And they were also very open and honest with me. They explained that I had a learning disability and that my brain learned differently from the beginning. And I think when parents understand that and they explain it, it's so much better, because the child learns what their disability is and what they're doing to help. But I had to be held accountable. It was not, okay, you have a disability, we don't expect you to learn, we don't expect you to try. They knew it wasn't always going to be perfect grades, but we spent a lot of long, tearful homework sessions. And when you were saying about labels, a lot of times parents are really fearful of that label. And having a label has good things, and it also has some bad things that can happen as well. But I'm really grateful that my parents shared that with me, because when they said that I learned differently and I was smart, it was a lot different than what I was getting from my peers, because my peers were telling me I was dumb and I couldn't learn. And it came from a much better source with my family.
Definitely. Yeah, and kids just don't know, they just jump on the bandwagon and I love that your parents told you, because it's true that you just learn differently. You're not, it's not that you can never do it. You just have to be taught a different way.
Right.
And that's all it is. And that's why it's important for not just special education teachers and not just the educational system, but workplaces to give the information in different formats. Because kids grow up, they're still the same people. Their learning styles have not changed.
Right.
Their communication styles have, changed to a little bit, but mostly not, and it's, so it's very important for successful classrooms to be successful and workplaces to be successful, teams and stuff, that they address all learning and communication formats.
Exactly. And that they learn what to do, because 70% of people with disabilities are unemployed. A lot of times it's the workplace doesn't really understand what to do. And sometimes it's also the employee doesn't know how to advocate or how to effectively do that too, or how to ask for the accommodations and what accommodations work, which ones don't. And I often say, I really try with a lot of my students to get them how to advocate for themselves, because so many of my students, they're going to graduate and they're going to leave us, but their disability isn't going to leave them. So I want them to know how to be able to handle that. And sometimes we have some pretty open conversations in the classroom. We had a student that didn't know he had a disability a few weeks ago. And I can remember my boss goes, yeah, you do. And she went up quietly and told him what it was. And she said, it's not a bad thing. Mrs. Steiner has a math learning disability. And that's really a unique opportunity because I get to share that. And so often it's, oh, they're the ones that are the professionals, and they have their role for teaching. And I love the staff that I work with, but I'm one of the only ones that can go in and say, I know what it's like to have a disability. I understand what you're going through, and this is how we advocate, and this is what works.
Oh, and I agree with you. Like those individuals that have a disability themselves can relate so much more on a level with other individuals. But it's also important to note that there's so many other individuals that are adults now that have never been diagnosed, and they just struggle and they don't realize. And I mean, it's not at the top of their mind. It's like, oh, I would have been, diagnosed when I was a kid. Or they're misdiagnosed as young adults, and because the research has just been, historically the research was so geared towards white young males.
Exactly.
And so it's there's so many people that are have built coping mechanisms to get through life, and they don't even realize it.
Hey, I know a lot of people that are adults and they say, well, they never diagnosed me, but I know I have a math disability. And my mom has said the same thing, and even my dad, but my dad found a way to be able to learn that. Whether he does or not, I don't know. But yeah, my mom's like, I've never been good at that. They didn't diagnose people back then. And they didn't. Sometimes they misdiagnose people. I can remember when I was in school for learning support, we had students that were in my class that they had autism. A lot of them did, or I think some of them did, because learning support just wasn't really helping them. It wasn't getting them to what they needed. And I did get a chance to talk with one who said, yeah, I actually have autism. And that was something to be able to hear that. And he had a lifetime of issues with addiction and things like that, because they didn't properly diagnose the person. So, and some have behavior problems. It felt like with learning support, we just threw everybody in that couldn't function in classroom. And at least we did. There was some where we did do some interventions, like tests being read, and we had instruction. But it's just changed a lot. And there's good things, and then there's some bad things too. But yeah, it's changed.
It's always going to be a process of learning and revising as we learn new things, because we are such complex creatures, and
we are.
And I mean, everybody comes with a different experience, and so it's how can organizations and schools create more inclusive environments for individuals with hidden disabilities?
I think one of the first things that people can do is really listen to the person, because I have a lot of people who will say, well, we can't see your disability. So they wonder, well, why can't you do this? Why? So I think a lot of times it's listening to the person when they come in there is a big thing. And I think it's also regarding the person with understanding, and also just patience. Sometimes it might take me a little bit longer to do something, or to learn how to do something. And it's to have that patience with that, and to realize, okay, this is valid. A lot of times I do have that privilege that I can walk into a job interview, or I can walk into a classroom and people can't see my disability. And a lot of times I might get a job that maybe I might have to do with an accommodation, or maybe it's just not even going to be a good fit for me at all. But people don't know that. And then when I get in there and I struggle, sometimes people don't get why you're struggling or why you need an accommodation. So it's really important for me to know how to effectively advocate. I think that's a big thing. And I think it's also really important, especially for OVR reps or people who are in a job coaching or placement for people who have disabilities, is to make it a customized approach. Because a lot of times what I find is they want to put a rubber stamp on everything. And a lot of the services are geared towards individuals that have intellectual disabilities or developmental. And that's perfectly fine. I think that's great for individuals who need that. I mean, every person's different, but I can remember when I was dealing with one of those agencies, but before I found the job that I've been at, they were saying, okay, well, why don't we just have you circle jobs in the newspaper? I thought, well, I could do this at home. Yeah. Okay, you have a job interview. Oh, great. Do you want us to go with you for support? I'm like, no, I don't really need that. And we had an event and I got to see a lot of the other people that had disabilities weren't necessarily learning disabilities. They had Down syndrome or things. And I thought, well,
more
this
physical
is
or mental and
emotional. And some had physical disabilities too. And I thought, well, this is why this isn't working. They're trying to put me, give me the services that might be more appropriate for somebody who has a different kind of disability. And they really didn't know what to do. And my mom even got to the point, she was, you're doing better on your own. You're finding jobs, you're finding temporary work. And it just was a matter of time before I found what was the right fit for me, and a lot of years.
Job searches in general take so long.
Yeah.
Especially once you get a degree. So it's it's a lot tougher competition. But just for listeners, so I'm going to define one of the acronyms you stated. Listeners, OVR, Michelle mentioned OVR, that's the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. That is the, the Pennsylvania State Office for the under labor and industry for to work with individuals who have any kind of disability. But as Michelle said, sometimes some of the counselors, vocational counselors, don't know how to work with all, the whole realm of disabilities, individuals with disabilities. So I know in Texas, where I was originally from, it's Texas Rehabilitation Commission. Every state, it's called something else. Yep. So exactly. But go ahead.
A great program if you're going to go back to school. They pay for all the school. They pay for testing. Yeah, so it is wonderful.
It is. I mean, there's a lot of wonderful services out there if you have a disability. There's career and vocational programs for individuals with visual disabilities, mental and physical disabilities. I mean, and every city has numerous ones, and you can be a client of many different ones. You don't have to stick with just one, because they might be able to complement each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So there's some great programs. So at least from an outside perspective, there's some great programs.
There really is. I mean, it comes a long way. It's coming a long way from what it was even years ago, and it's just there are some programs that can help with that as well.
It's definitely. I used to work at Goodwill Central Texas, and they have numerous programs. And one of them is a vocational program that works with individuals with disabilities that gets referrals from the state's employment, Texas Rehabilitation Commission. So, So what are some common misconceptions about learning disabilities and how can we address them? So we kind of touched on this a little bit, but if there's a teacher out there that's really new in their career, or for bosses and supervisors and team leads and coworkers, colleagues, in your experiences, how can these colleagues and supervisors address these common misconceptions about learning disabilities?
Well, one of the most common one is that people with learning disabilities can't learn. And that's not true. We can learn. It's just we have to find a different way to do it. And sometimes I think a big one, especially those who work with students who are secondary students, is, well, we have to prepare them before they go to college, that they got to learn all this math. And people have thought that I couldn't go to college because of the math. And it was a challenge for me, but there's ways around that. And I think that's the key sometimes, is learning how to encounter when you have that difficulty. Is it, support services, definitely making sure even when you're going to tutoring or you're going to class and you're still not really doing well on the test, but that's creating that record that you're trying and giving those strategies. Sometimes it's just learning how to pick classes that you need, but it's showing them college is possible. Trade school is possible. Even with a disability, you just have to find what you like. But we don't want to just hit the default button that, okay, you have a math learning disability or you have dyslexia, so automatically you're going to trade school. I had that experience. I had a learning support teacher who didn't think that I could go to college because of my disability. And I decided that it was something I wanted to do. And I did meet with Office for Vocational Rehabilitation, and we decided that that was a good goal. I had to get tested for a learning disability again, and the psychiatrist told me I would not go beyond community college. So I think sometimes it's that wording. Right. It's the wording, I think, a lot of times, to not sugarcoat everything, that, oh, you're going to be fine. But it's also saying, yes, this will be a challenge, but I know you'll find a way to be able to work with that. So I think it's the wording's big. I also think another misconception is someone's going to outgrow the disability. And that's just not true. I mean, you're going to graduate, you're still going to have the disability carry with you. Another misconception is, if somebody has a bachelor's degree or somebody goes on or even gets their master's, oh, you must have overcome your disability. That's really not true. I mean, I will always have the math disability, and that's okay. But the reason I have success is I found a way to work around that. And I think sometimes we want to we want to encourage dreams. We don't want to go and say, well, you can't do that. But we also want to be able to give them the reality too, that you might want to do something, but do you want to go on with, if you need a lot of math? I knew I didn't want to become an elementary school teacher, because a lot of people thought, oh, you should be a certified teacher. And I'm like, I knew I couldn't pass the praxis, and
a lot of people more math. Yeah,
if you just get if you could just get your act together, it would be fine. But I researched other programs that were out there, and I think we just want to be really realistic too, but also word it with just some encouragement for other people, and let them be a lot of their guide on what's going to happen. I also think a lot of people tell me, well, you don't look like you're disabled. And
I hate that. Yeah,
I know. And people think it's a compliment sometimes too. And having a disability isn't a bad thing. And I really wish that a lot of professionals would just tell people, be honest, that, okay, you have a disability, and that's okay.
Yep. I mean, isn't it? I mean, there's so many even actors out there that have dyslexia and are on the autism spectrum disorder or spectrum, and it's and they've come out. And you're like, wow, you have dyslexia. It's like, but I mean, because they like you said, they learn to work with it. They learn, they know what they need to do to work around it, to get them to where they need to be. And any young listeners out there, if you have a disability, whether it's a visible or invisible disability, there are so many services in colleges and universities that are there to help you. So make sure to get connected to them right away, because and they're free. They're free services. It doesn't matter what your income is. connect with those student support services offices, Office of Students with Disabilities. There's like Michelle said, your state vocational office that works with individuals with disabilities, because they oftentimes, if you meet their criteria, as Michelle said, she had to get tested again. And that usually is a process, regardless of the state you live in. If you meet the right criteria, they'll pay for some of your college or tuition. I mean, it's not a lot, but it helps. Anything helps. And so there's so many free services. So please, please, please ask questions. Ask questions to your guidance counselors at high school, or your counselors if you're at a community college or a trade school. Ask those questions, because if you think your school doesn't have it, you're most likely wrong. And if they don't, then that's a school you don't want to be at anyway, because you want a school that's going to provide support services to promote student success, regardless of who you are and your background. So it's very important to do your research when you're looking at schools. And employers too, because
definitely.
Yes, because you want to be able to go to a job that you can be for the most part your authentic self, and get the supports you need to be successful for a job that you know you can do.
Exactly. I have an employment story that I remember. I knew it was not the employer for me. The woman looked at my application and she said, "Oh, it says here that you work with children that have disabilities." I said, "Yeah." She goes, "You enjoyed that?" I said, "Oh yeah, I do enjoy that." And she goes, "Oh, we don't have any students with disabilities at our center."
Oh.
And I thought, yeah, I don't think this is the right fit for me. So I wasn't upset whenever I didn't get called to say I got hired.
And chances are they did.
Yeah,
in students with disabilities, but that they just never were identified as,
identified, or or the families. It was a more affluent daycare center, so a lot of the families could just be able to send their kid there, and exactly.
Wow. Yeah, so look for those individuals looking for jobs and stuff. Look for those key things, those triggers, those red flags, I should say.
Exactly.
And you can always decline a job offer.
Yeah, you can. Yep.
So how does intersectionality play a role in the experiences of individuals with invisible disabilities, particularly in relation to race, gender, and socioeconomic status?
Well, I always say the disabilities don't discriminate against you by your race, your gender, who you love, who you vote for. We see disabilities on both sides of everything. And it's just one of those things that comes up a lot of times that, every community has one. Everybody does. 1 in 5 people have learning disabilities. So most likely you're about ready, if you're in the room, somebody else has it. You're not the only one that does. And I'm not great with numbers, but I was at a writing group and I shared my story with some people after I got a little more courage. And sure enough, people were giving me feedback. They said, "I have a learning disability." And I counted, and it was 1 in 5 people in that room that they had a learning disability. So you find them everywhere.
That's 20% of the population, probably even more. Exactly. So you're right. It does not discriminate. So intersectionality when it comes to experiences of individuals. So you can have someone who's disabled, who has a hidden disability that might be a Black male. A Black male who's LGBTQ plus, who's a veteran. So it's like there's all these identities that the system puts on us, and sometimes, as you had said earlier, Michelle, it can be a good thing or a bad thing. All these labels, and so it's important for us, like when it's a good thing, to use that platform to help others.
Yep, exactly.
And so to help others with when it's like when there's bad or I wouldn't say bad labels, but marginalized labels.
Yeah, exactly.
That are more stigmatized and stuff. Help, use that good platform of yours to raise it up and
right.
And speak for them.
Exactly. To use that to be able to speak about that, some of the good things, or not everything it's bad, and not putting that stigma that, oh, you have a disability, I bet you're at home. And some people that does serve them, that's what they need to be doing with their lives. But there's other people that really want to be out there and working and want a job and want to have that. It's just sometimes those resources are really hard to come by. And sometimes it's just understanding people and connecting them and just having that understanding. Okay, I have a label. I know this is going to be more challenging at times for me, but I was really lucky that I just had parents that really push for me to be independent, because they've always said, we're not going to be around forever. You do need to learn to do what you can for yourself.
Oh, you sound like you have some amazing parents.
I do. I'm very blessed.
That's awesome. So you brought up a very important topic just now, that sometimes the accommodations can't always be provided, or and I use the word "can't" in quotation marks,
right.
Because employers need to know that, hey, if this is what a person needs, an individual who's visually impaired or who has scoliosis or something, ADHD, who's on the autism spectrum, some mental health issues, if this is what they need to be successful, you need to get it for them. If they're qualified in every other way, and they're the best candidate on paper, and interviewed extremely well, help them, give them, it's not even giving them a leg up, just give them what they need to be to do the job that they can do. And that's why it's also important for people to also get connected with these programs, these vocational programs, because that help individuals with disabilities, because a lot of times they can make sure they help advocate for the individual to get those accommodations and make sure that they do get them, whether it's out of the state funds or a combination between the state and employer funds. So the employer doesn't have to pay for everything.
No, they don't. And sometimes it's just something really simple to give somebody. I know that when I go in, I have to just explain to people, all the kids know this. I can't help you with math. They can still put me in a class, but that's it is what it is. But I can't help them really with math, and that's okay, as long as we all have that understanding, and everybody knows that maybe if I am in a math class, or I am helping out in a science class, and I can't do what some of the work might be, or things like that, I can keep a student on task, or I can help them with reading something. I mean, as long as we're both on the same page. But sometimes it's just a really simple accommodation with that. And I think it's just that key is looking for what they need to. And as you said, sometimes that can be with getting help from the state. There is a lot of great programs that can provide accommodations with that. In fact, I was reading a study with Job Accommodations Network that some of the accommodations may be more expensive, but there's so much value when you do provide them at a job, because individuals that have disabilities sometimes turn out to be better employees than ones who don't.
Yeah.
And another point you meant too was somebody that's a veteran. Sometimes disabilities might be acquired. You might have didn't have one, but then you went to war and you come home and you may not be able to walk, or you may have some other mental issues that come up. Other times, just people are walking down the street and they might get hit by a bus, or or fall or something, and that just dramatically changes the rest of your life. And we never know when that's going to happen. And it's not that we live in fear, but it's having that understanding with somebody, because we never know if we're going to be in that position or not.
I agree. I'm so glad you brought that up because it could happen to any one of us, even
Yeah.
if we don't have a hidden or visible
Yeah.
disability. Um, things happen. Life happens. Life is not always
Right.
kind to us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
So
And we don't wish it on anybody either. I
no,
mean, that's the
definitely
thing.
not.
We definitely don't.
Mhm.
But and just sometimes just life in general. I mean, people, this happens, and it's just learning different ways and to be a society that just really accommodates them. I have a friend that her mother is elderly, and we always talk about, especially with me with the hand dexterity, going in one of the stores, and when they don't, when you go into the $1 store that does not have the automatic door, how
Oh,
difficult that is to be able to
mhm.
have your cart as you're going out
Oh
of that door.
yeah. Hmm.
And it's really hard. And that's the beauty when we start putting in a lot of universal design in places,
Hmm.
that it just doesn't benefit the person that has limited hand dexterity or is in a wheelchair. That benefits everybody. The mom that
Yep.
has the stroller, or just somebody that just wants to walk through the door that has a bunch of bags to carry. So I
Hmm.
think that's one of the beautiful things that I just love about when we start becoming a society that just creates a more accessible way for everybody.
I agree. I agree. Oh wow. As you're talking about, I was thinking of I had a guest a few months ago who was talking about marketing and inclusion in marketing, and she brought up, and I didn't know this, that Selena Gomez. I knew she has lupus
Mm-hmm.
and stuff, but she has a new beauty line that is
Oh,
all for easily accessible containers. And I
yeah.
was like, what? I was like, and
Mm-hmm.
everything from her perfumes to lotion. I'm like,
Neat.
whoa. I know. So I'm pretty sure it was Selena Gomez. And
Oh, yeah.
so
Nice. I'll have to look that
so I
up.
was like, that is pretty cool. She said the name of her product, but I can't remember it, or her brand, but I can't remember what it is. I apologize. But yeah,
That's
so
okay. Neat.
even like products and stuff like that, not just buildings and stuff, but accessibility when it comes to product design is very important as well.
Exactly. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
adaptable
Mhm.
clothes that are coming out with that,
Oh, it's awesome.
and just different kinds of equipment that people can use
Mhm.
to be able to be able to live. And I think that's the thing that needs to happen, and to research that. And some of them
I
are really
agree.
expensive things. I mean, some of them are just the most simple things you can think of that
Yeah.
that comes out.
Yeah. I mean, it's like that one dog throwing ball thing where it's like a stick with a thing and you just throw it like, like you don't have to
I
grab
saw
the
that. That's
ball anymore.
interesting.
I know. I was like,
Yeah,
whoa, I see them at the dog park all the time. It's pretty cool. I was like,
nice,
wow. So you don't have to grab your hand around the ball. It's just a stick that you have to hold. And it's like,
neat,
it's pretty cool. Yeah.
nice.
So, so speaking of people and colleagues and all, so what steps can allies take to better support colleagues, students, or friends with hidden or visible disabilities?
I think one of the things is just give them a chance and include them, and just really treat them like how, with the same respect that you'd want to be treated with somebody else. Somebody just comes into work and maybe they need to do something a little bit differently, and that's okay. And just really include them in on things. And yeah, exactly. That everybody comes in with their own unique skills, their own unique challenges as well. I know I have a friend that she was just amazed. Like, I can't use the escalator because of the visual perception.
Mm.
And she's like, I'm able to see, but I just don't know when to step on or to step off. And she goes, I'm just amazed. You just go, you know, to use the elevator. And I'm like, well, this is a way of life for me. And it's just being accepting and kind. Um, and that can look at a lot in different ways. That could be something in different ways too. I'm great. I have a wonderful husband that can take me to work in the morning, but I have a great coworker that takes me home at the end of the day.
Oh, it's awesome.
And it's just noticing that, okay, you need a ride. That's fine. You're
Mhm.
right on my way. And that helps to be supportive with that. That's just one little way that we can help out somebody. I also live in a central location where I can walk places too, but it's nice whenever you have a friend and just accepts me like just anybody else. I think that helps. And it's also just asking people, well, what does work for you? Obviously, if you want me to drive you or pick you up, I'm not able to do that. But maybe there's something I can do that you're not able to be able to do. And it's just asking and just seeing what that person can, what the person can't do, and just how you would just treat anybody else.
Yes, I agree with that. And but you won't know unless you ask. And it's okay to ask. It's not, you're not going to offend somebody. They're actually going to be appreciative. Now, you'll offend them if you ask rudely. Ask respectfully.
Yes, exactly.
Like you're really caring. Like
right, exactly. It's just like you would just talk to somebody and to just treat them like other people, and also to be accepting when somebody does come in there, rather than saying, "Oh, I got to do all this work," or "I have this person." It's like, well, no, it's not supposed to be like that. It's more, if somebody is just, it's on this, I'm expected to get my job done the same way my coworkers expected to get their job done. I just might need to have a different way to do things. I might need to have instructions repeated a couple different times, or just maybe more practice on something. Or I might just need a ride in to get to work. Or sometimes I may not use the main staircase. I might have to use the back one. But it's just, I'm expected to get my job done the same way everybody else is. It just might look a little bit different.
That's right. Thank you so much for bringing that up, because a lot of people like say, "Oh, they're a diversity hire." It's like, no, that has nothing to do with it. They may be an individual disability, or they may be a person of color, or LGBTQ plus, or a veteran. That has nothing to do with it. It's always what skills are they bringing? Can they do the job? Were they the best person on paper and in the interview? And their references, everybody has to go through the same process, whether they have a disability or are from a marginalized population or not. And as you said, everybody's expected to be able to do their job with or without the accommodations. And so, in my experience, workplaces need more of that implicit bias training on a regular basis, because people don't always realize their stereotypes. And we all have them. We all have them. So
we all do. Exactly. We all have them. And I think that's especially important when I work with students, is knowing what my unconscious bias is before I go into a situation, because I know people that they may not be aware of that. And that's also not my job to bring that to their attention. But sometimes I hear things like, okay.
I mean, it can be a learning moment. It can be a teaching moment.
Yeah, it can be.
So as long as it's a safe space, and usually classrooms and stuff are. But it's ask your colleagues questions. See how you guys can help each other out.
True.
Like you can do something for them, they can do something for you. Now, it's not like doing each other's work or anything like that. But it's like, but it's so I used to work with a colleague who was in a wheelchair. I think he had CP. But he could do his job like there was no tomorrow. He had great numbers in his successes and stuff, but he had there were people on our team that had that relationship with him, that they helped him out with certain things, not job related, but like especially like in emergencies, like a fire drill is where the elevators are shut down in a fire drill. What you have to, so colleagues and supervisors need to think of plans like that. And the only way you're going to do that is to ask the individual, what they need. Will you need in these situations?
And a lot of times what we might do during a fire drill, if somebody has a physical disability, we'll tell them beforehand. Now, obviously, if it's the real thing, you're going to have to go down. I mean, everything happens, but we might just say, okay, go out 5 minutes early, go out 10 minutes early if you know that's going to happen. Because
Yeah.
we might have students that have sensory issues, and hearing that loud thing that's
Ooh,
annoying to everybody
yeah.
else can really be hard for
Shut them
them.
down. Yeah.
Yeah, and we can also have students that have physical disabilities, can be really hard to go down those stairs. And especially with me trying to take one of them down too, I mean, that can be
Oh,
hard.
yeah.
Or we can even have a student maybe that's visually impaired, and it just saves time to get out there early if you can. Now, if it's a real fire, everything we have to go by what what the plan is.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
Yep. And for employers and school districts, it's very important because you also have individuals who may be hard of hearing. So
Yep.
to have those alarms to not just make the sound, but also the flashing lights
The lights. Yep.
and
Exactly.
that's where individuals with the epilepsy might have issues.
Yeah,
And so there's a lot of bad, good and bad with, but it's like these are things that, as long as those in charge or those supervisors, teachers, whatever, know, they can start making those plans.
Right. And we can and we can take those things into consideration. And we talk about, okay, maybe someone that is deaf might need the lights, but for somebody that has epilepsy, that may not be the best thing too. And how do we handle when we get into a situation like that?
Yeah. And as you had said earlier, like one of the other things might be like giving you some extra time for things, but also like if you're about to have a meeting, send the agenda ahead of time. Send the stuff ahead of time. That's good for everybody, you know.
Yep. They get that, yeah.
And let people record, you know, in certain meetings. It's not appropriate. I understand, but let people for meetings where it is, let them record if they have if they're more auditory learners. Because I know, like me, if I'm writing, I don't always hear that. I learned long ago in college. Like if I was writing, I heard things wrong or I didn't hear anything. If I am not a multitasker.
Right, exactly. And I think too, I mean, being understanding, if you want me to, I mean, my handwriting is not great with my hand dexterity, but I can write something for class. But if you want me to write a note home to somebody, like I had a student that was visually impaired and I had to do homework and they couldn't read my handwriting. So I typed it. And a lot of people will say, oh, you need to brush up on your handwriting. I'm like, no, I have colleagues who would say, it's okay. I'm okay with typing things out. I also hear a lot of people will say, with our kids, you need to learn how to tell time because you're not always going to have a watch. And I can't do that with my math, but I have a digital watch. So I think sometimes it's showing people, okay, if this idea doesn't work, do something else. And if you love writing out things in cursive and handwriting, you've got beautiful handwriting and you can tell time on an analog clock, go for it. But be accepting that maybe other people might need that as well. And it's just giving that person that choice. Exactly.
So yeah, thank you. So let's go back to like educators and employers. So how can educators and employers ensure they're providing the necessary accommodations without singling out or stigmatizing individuals?
A lot of times there's ways you can subtly do things. I can remember I had a student a few years ago that was creating a lot of distractions in the classroom. And I came over and I found out he couldn't read. So I was like, okay, really subtly, I said, do you want me to read that to you? And I would say what it said. I have another student that I'm not sure if he has dysgraphia, but it's really hard for him to be able to express his ideas. And he was in a group setting, and it was the standoff between the two of them. Neither one of those kids wanted to write anything down. And the teacher's like, oh, write it down. And the kids aren't doing it. And I gave them a minute or two to try to get that independence to work on their own. But when it still wasn't happening, I went over and I said, do you want me to write that down for you? And it worked. And then before you know it, they are writing stuff down on their own. But it's just sometimes showing them, just coming in and just being really subtle, not announcing the disability, not being like, oh, real loud, do you need help with this? But just that subtle giving that. And then sometimes there are things you can do in a class. If you have a classroom with a lot of students who have a disability and it's in their individual education plan that they need to test read aloud, sometimes you can do that as a teacher. You can do that with all the students, not just the students who have disabilities. And if somebody wants to move ahead on their test, they're more than welcome to do that. That can happen. And then if they need extra time on it, then a lot of times what happens is some of the kids are already moved ahead that need that, and they can move on to a quiet activity or something. And the ones who just need the extra time can focus on that or can finish it later. The beautiful thing is whenever you're able to show when you see how accommodations are, and you wouldn't know that they're doing that. And in the classroom, nobody's looking like they're getting singled out. It's just moving like you would have a typical classroom where everybody's getting what they need.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. It's like you don't want it to be like this huge like magnifying glass or something like that.
Right.
With a arrow, like lighted arrow pointing, nothing like that. So yeah, the more discreet the accommodations can be, the better.
Right.
Unfortunately, there's some accommodations that can't be discreet.
Right.
But the students usually take them with them to each class, and the colleagues, if they're workers and employees in the workplace, the same thing. They'll take them with them to the meetings and whatever it is they need. And it's just because it becomes part of the routine. And there might be stares in the beginning, or questions, but that's when questions are fine. Ask.
They're fine.
What's that for? What can I get one of those? It's like, well, it's for this, and it's like, oh, okay.
Right.
And then it just becomes second nature. It's just people will become, I wouldn't say invisible to it, but they just know that, okay, so is using that because they need this they require this, and that's fine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation, Michelle. I love education and working with individuals with disabilities and those from marginalized populations. So I loved hearing your stories. So thank you so much for sharing. And I'm very curious about the story about the dinosaur. So you need to share that.
I don't even think we have it, but if we did, that would be, I know one of those things you probably wish we would have kept.
Cool, but I think that's just was such a sweet story that your dad found that, and it just stemmed from there. It's just like, wow, that's awesome. So we're going to go into some key takeaways now for our listeners, and then we'll get into some next steps for our listeners for like call to action for PD and professional development and resources, and then I'll ask you how our listeners can get in touch with you.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So some key takeaways, listeners. Michelle and I talked about understanding hidden disabilities. Michelle shared her insights on the challenges faced by individuals with learning disabilities, emphasizing the importance of awareness and understanding in creating inclusive environments. We talked about the importance of advocacy. Our conversation highlighted why advocacy for individuals with invisible disabilities is crucial, not just in educational settings, but also in workplaces and communities. We talked about creating supportive spaces. We learned some strategies for fostering supportive environments where individuals with hidden disabilities can thrive, drawing from Michelle's experience as a paraeducator. We talked about personal and professional impact. We discovered how Michelle's own journey with an invisible disability has shaped her advocacy and work, offering inspiration and practical advice for others. And we talked about resources and continued learning, and we gained some access to a few resources and tips for supporting individuals with hidden disabilities, whether it's in the educational setting or in the workplace or community at large, both as an ally and as someone living with these challenges. So any other key takeaways you can think of that I may have missed, Michelle?
I would just tell people that have disabilities that to know what they want and to be able to find a way to do it and to just give people, and for employers or other educational places, to just give somebody with a disability a chance.
Nice. I love that. Thank you. All right. So possible next steps, listeners, some call to actions and professional development and resources. So educate yourself, dive deeper into the world of hidden disabilities by reading articles and blogs like Michelle's Mission. Advocate. Yes. Advocate. Use your voice to advocate for more inclusive policies and practices in your workplace, school, or community. Engage in conversations. Start discussions about invisible disabilities in your circles to increase awareness and reduce stigma and implicit biases. Support. If you know someone with a hidden disability, ask how you can support them and respect their needs and boundaries. And participate. Join or create support groups, attend workshops, or engage in training that focuses on invisible disabilities and inclusion. Any other next steps, Michelle, that you'd like to include?
I would just, tell people to be open to that and to look for some ways that they can, if you don't have a support group or somebody like that, look online, look for places that have that, look for the resources that are out there.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. So, Michelle, how can people get hold of you if they are interested in having you write an article, or if they're interested in connecting with you to be a speaker or in some other professional capacity?
Sure. You can find me at my blog, www.mrsmichellesmission.com, and I'm on Facebook and Instagram as well.
And what are your handles?
I would have to see. I have the numbers like with that.
So if I just looked up Michelle Steiner, I'd be able to find you?
You might be, okay. I can leave the link for that. Yeah.
Okay, great. If you can send that to me
sure.
This week, I can make sure it gets in.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome. So listeners, I will have Michelle's contact information and her website on one of the last slides of our podcast today, as well as in the summary of our podcast today. So remember, our episodes drop every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So check out our next episode. Also, keep us informed if you want to hear certain topics. Feel free to comment and share this podcast with your friends and family members and colleagues. And with that, I guess I will let you go. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And remember, stay diversifused. Want to be a guest speaker on the Get Diversifused podcast? I'm on the lookout for guests, so if you're passionate about DEI and would like to share your unique insights, experiences, or success stories, I want to hear from you. If you're a fellow podcaster who's passionate about DEI, let's swap the mic and amplify each other's voices. If you're interested in being a guest, reach out to me at Andrea@diversifuse.com and I'll send you the link to our guest interest form. Hope to hear from you soon. Remember, stay diversifused. Now go out there and make a difference. And as always, for more strategies on building inclusive workplaces and communities, check out Diversifuse. We're here to guide you on your DEI journey. Make sure to visit our website at diversifuse.com and follow us on social media for the latest happenings, blog posts, tips, and events.